Hello, everybody. I'm here with Deborah Kobewka, who is the CEO for Evaluate. Evaluate is an HG portfolio company. Evaluate provides commercial intelligence and critical data for the pharma sector. Thank you very much for joining me, Deborah. It's a pleasure to have you with me today.
Thanks, Ruby, and it's really great to be here.
I've got a few questions, Deborah, the usual routines. I'm going to start off by kicking off with the first one, if I may.
Sure.
What were the particular challenges that this COVID climate has created in trying to raise additional funding?
Yes, what an incredible period we've been through. Let's think back, when COVID hit us a year ago, nobody knew what was going to happen. We were entering into a situation that none of us had really experienced before in any way. If I remember rightly, the financial markets were all over the place, and there was a lot of doom and gloom sort of predictions and scenarios, etc. Now, that was about a year after I had joined Evaluate. I joined Evaluate in March 2019. And part of the attraction for me to Evaluate was because, I knew the company well, and I knew that they had a really strong market position, a great reputation with clients, and because of the sort of tremendous potential of the data and technology that they had and products to support the pharma industry. Basically, thinking about where we were then in terms of the investment cycle, when I joined, I was really immediately very focused on preparing the business for reinvestment. So when the pandemic hit about a year ago, we'd actually been we were sort of well developed in our plans for reinvestment, and actually pretty fairly close to a transaction when the pandemic started to really impact. And I think the reality at that point was there was so much economic uncertainty, as I've mentioned. It really put the conversations on pause, just while everybody took stock, tried to figure out what was going to happen. So I think really that was our primary challenge that we faced. We were poised to move, and then suddenly we had to, stop and see what was going to happen in terms of the global situation.
On that note, what were the factors that allowed you to restart the process? Because you did, obviously, a successful outcome.
We did, and actually we restarted the process around about May last year, so May 2020, and actually then ultimately went on to complete our transaction by August, so fairly quick in the end. I think the key factors were our business performance, and also the strategy work and preparation that we'd done ahead of the pandemic. Firstly, on the business performance, despite the pandemic, our business really continued to deliver strong performance and growth in the way that we'd anticipated. And I think, a lot of that is to do with where Evaluate sits. We're in a fairly unique position between pharma and technology industries, two sectors that actually continue to do really well in the current environment. And our customers, who are, of course, the pharma industry, they had the dual challenge of continuing their ongoing business as usual agendas, but then additionally and really rapidly having to respond to the COVID challenge. And I guess even on top of that, they had to consider uncertainties and opportunities that the pandemic might create. So we continue to see really significant increase in demand for our services. And, customers just continue to seek out the data, the analytics that can help them to prepare for some of the really significant unknowns that their businesses face. We do a lot of work in predictive analytics and data technologies, and that really made us very, very uniquely suited to meet those needs and continues to do so. So I guess that's kind of where we're at, and then of course we had to rapidly relocate to work from home. But that happened really, frankly, with minimal disruption. Including our offshore team in India. We have over 100 people in India, and like us, they had to suddenly go into work from home mode. But barring a few sort of hiccups, things went incredibly smoothly. So the Evaluate team continued to deliver really excellent results, and indeed we continued on our expansion plans as we had planned initially. Delivering new products, and then continuing to push forward on our investment agenda around people, around technologies, data operations. And funnily enough, even as we went into lockdown, we were able to close out on a small acquisition. So the business continued to perform really, really well. And then to my second point, planning and preparation prior to the pandemic was really critical. And as I've said, we'd already started that. We were well into that process. And we came into the transaction discussion then with a very concrete, ambitious, evidence-based strategy for growth. So I think because we were able to demonstrate that business progress in spite of the pandemic, and we also had a great strategy, it really made it quite easy for the process to restart.
My next question is around the outcome. Obviously, HG ended up investing in Evaluate. From your perspective, why was HG the right investor to take Evaluate's business forward?
Yes, HG became involved with the business in 2016 as a minority investor, and that was, before I joined Evaluate. But with their support, that really helped to grow and scale the business, quite frankly, at a pace that probably just wouldn't have been feasible without their investment and guidance. And HG is Europe's largest investor in software and services, and so they bring tremendous amount of experience and knowledge to the table. They're actually delivering a lot of growth, across their portfolio of companies, sort of circa 22% growth, I think, annually. So it's clear that their approach and their expertise really delivers results. So for me as the CEO of the Evaluate business, I really valued the relationship with HG as I joined, and they have been super supportive of our strategy and focused on our growth journey with us. So it was a fairly easy choice to have their support on a reinvestment opportunity. And I guess also, they have a lot of expert resources that they bring to support our business, indeed to support all of their portfolio businesses. In particular areas, they help and support in technology, also in sales and marketing execution, and even functions like recruitment. So, lots of support. And I think for me, their interest and excitement in reinvesting in August, now as our majority shareholder, it was just a great vote of confidence for me and the business.
Deborah, one of the other questions which has been sort of kind of sitting there, I've been mulling over in the back of my mind, I was keen to ask you, was what do you believe will be the short and long-term impact of this pandemic on the actual pharmaceutical sector as a whole?
Yes, Ruby, I think that's really a great question, and one certainly a lot of people are thinking about, and obviously we're thinking about as well. In the short term, we're seeing two clear trends, scientific acceleration, but also rising valuations. So I think for me, the acceleration in science is, really interesting, and particularly thinking about that in terms of vaccine development. Without doubt, the mRNA technologies that we're seeing in the Pfizer vaccine, for example, that's going to continue to be a great source of innovation as a platform. And then, thinking about those rising valuations, the pandemic has actually had an incredible impact on the financials markets, enthusiasm for pharma, and indeed for pharma businesses of all sizes. So we've seen record amounts of venture capital and rising market valuations. In the longer term, obviously the sustainability of those high valuations may well be put to the test. But I think maybe also in the longer term, there's probably some other accelerations we should think about as well in terms of the industry. Pharma companies and regulatory agencies have just responded in such a fantastic way to the COVID-19 pandemic. Incredible speed. Of course, in doing so, they create expectations, and it may well be that there will be expectations and pressures to deliver against those sort of shorter approval timelines in the future. And I guess, thinking about the broader healthcare market as well, definitely seen an acceleration in the growth of digital health and telehealth solutions. Obviously, those solutions existed prior to COVID-19, but I think the social restrictions that have been, limiting interactions in a way have sort of normalised the application of digital and telehealth. And for many segments of healthcare, that may not go away. I actually hope it doesn't, because I think it brings a lot of efficiencies. And I guess, maybe finally, just thinking about transparency and accountability from the industry, in light of the recent concerns around the safety and efficacy that we've seen with certain COVID-19 vaccines. I think what you see from that is how important it is for pharma to be really clear and careful on, the safety and clinical data that they're, providing to consumers, to physicians, and regulatory agencies. And I guess that demand and interest is only going to increase in the future.
Evaluate provides critical data to the pharmaceutical sector, allowing, I suppose, decision makers to stay informed and empowered. What lasting impact do you believe this pandemic has on your business?
Yes, I mean, I guess I would say, in a changing market environment like the one that we're currently living through, data and information becomes even more vital. Now, the pharma industry has long approached the uncertainties of their R&D development and drug commercialization using, predictive data and indeed modeling. And this, this is required because they really need to understand the future. I think that's all been heightened by the unpredictable and significant impact of COVID-19, both in positive and negative ways. I mentioned earlier, we've seen how just simply the pace of pharma's work continues to accelerate. And that means that data and analytics needs to evolve at a comparable speed. So there's probably a combination of a couple of factors: the need to better predict the future and the acceleration of the industry that are going to really shape our business at the moment and as we go forward. Even before the pandemic hit, we were using artificial intelligence and data technology to build out better ways to predict the risk and return of pharmaceutical R&D assets. So we're now focused very much on expanding our capabilities in those areas, further leveraging technology to meet growing demands for new predictive tools, but also to provide data at a speed that reflects the day-to-day changes that are taking place in the market. And then just, thinking about our business as well, maybe a third thing from the pandemic that has impacted our business, and maybe this is closer to home, and that's just the renewed focus on the well-being of our employees. Our culture as a company has always been very, very centered on our employees, helping them to achieve success and recognizing and celebrating that success. But of course, this year has just been the most incredibly difficult one and has presented many, many opportunities for us to support them in many different ways. We've really looked in a very practical way at how we support very flexible working hours, new channels of company communication. And we've also, doubled down on our focus on things like diversity and inclusion as well. Because it's just been an incredible year of unprecedented change. But I guess the constant is that our employees are always going to be key to our success. So we've really wanted to double down on that commitment to their well-being. And that's something, of course, that will just continue into the longer term as the business has to think about coming back into a more regularized environment.
No, I think that's key. I think employee well-being is going to be something that's definitely going to be on any decent employer's mind to ensure as we make some sort of transition back, it's as positive experience as possible for everyone involved. Final
absolutely.
for you, Deborah. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you provide a CEO contemplating a similar journey to the one that you have just been on?
Yes, so certainly an incredible learning experience over the last couple of years. I guess, thinking about the transaction, really important to have a strong executive team, and indeed not just the executive team, but the next layer down, before you start to embark on the process that we've been through, because transactions are a tremendous amount of work. And of course, that comes on top of the day job. So you have to have the right team with the right focus to ensure you're going to have a successful outcome. And not just your own team, but in a similar way, having good advisors to support you from outside of the business. Not just those that can deliver strong guidance on the transaction, but those that can provide a really independent perspective and insight. So whether that's through your vendor due diligence or legal management advice, all of that can make a really big difference to the outcome you achieve. I guess timing is important, timing of the deal, because, in any business, there can be ups and downs as you grow towards maturity. So I think actually finding the right time in your growth cycle to bring in a new investor is really important as well. And perhaps also just thinking about the amount of scrutiny that you go through in the process. You really need to be, very strong and in a great position so you don't, jeopardize your results. So I think, that judgment around, when to go for it and then, being ready to cope with the scrutiny, I think it's really important. And of course, you've got to have that strong articulation and confidence in your business strategy, and also great evidence that backs that up, because that's, you need that to be able to build the confidence that you're going to be successful and be able to communicate that. So that comes through the value proposition, clear market definitions, really clear on unique competitive differentiators, and really concrete growth projections. So all of that, has to go into the mix. And maybe just to reflect finally again on that level of scrutiny, it is unparalleled. You've got to be prepared for it. You're going to go through some very thorough processes of presentation. You've got to be able to defend your strategy, and make sure you said you've got lots of confidence in that. I mean, the good part of that is once you've been through that process, it's actually really valuable, because then when you're in a post-transaction phase, any weak areas that were identified, you've got a strong focus on them. So it's actually a great process to actually have to go through.
Thank you very much, Deborah. That was really, really insightful. Genuinely appreciate the investment of your time, and appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And on a personal note, I'm absolutely delighted to be interviewing my first female PE-backed chief exec. I hope many more to follow.
Indeed, yes, I hope so too.
Thank you very much.